Hi Crafty peeps, it's Kat. Today's video is pretty straightforward. We're saving some money by making our own stencils and corner guides. Best part is that for stencils, you don't even need any kind of special tools or materials. You can just use the good old cardstock. Alright, let's get into it. Okay, so first let's talk about the type of dies that you will need for this, because not every die will work. Basic shapes will work in 99.9% of the cases, so your ovals, your rectangles and nesting dies are perfect for this. And typically the larger the shape is, the easier it will be to cut out. Let's talk about the background dies. The ones that will work best here will be the ones that do not cut the border. If you see here, there's no cutting edge on the edge of the die, as opposed to the one that does cut the edge. You see that line? That's not to say that the ones that cut the edge will not work, they will. They could just limit your size of the cardstock that you will use to do the stenciling a little bit. And I'll show you one way to go around it. And then this is another one with quite an intricate pattern, I have to say, but this one doesn't cut the edge, just cuts out the shapes. Now, individual shapes might or might not work. Here I have some large snowflakes. These are Pink Fresh, I believe. And the larger one worked for me with the thicker material. We'll get to it in just a second. The smaller ones, however, I had trouble cutting them out. So we'll see if cutting them from a thinner material will actually work. This die cuts out all of the open little areas, but it doesn't cut the edge, just like the plate. Oh, and then one more thing. I have a die here that cuts out 3 windows. So if you have anything like that, where it cuts out some sort of shape, but doesn't cut the edge, that should be fine. Now let's talk about the method that doesn't require any kind of special tools. And this one I just cut out of plain cardstock using this background plate. And as you can see, it cuts just fine. It didn't cut the edge. I already pre-cut my panel to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. You can make this larger so that you have more area around your pattern, and that should technically help you stick your cardstock to it. The only problem with cutting out your stencils from cardstock is that it will not last you very long. You can only put so much ink through it before the edges start fraying and before it starts giving out on you. This is where a stencil material like mylar comes in. And this is just a giant 12 by 12 sheet of mylar that I got off of Amazon. The milky one is 7 mil thickness. Mils just refers to how thick material is, so this one feels pretty sturdy. Kind of like the material that all of the companies, all of the brands use for their stencils. And then this one, the clear one, is 4 mil thickness, so it's half the thickness of the milky one. And honestly, this might as well just be a lightweight acetate because I can't tell the difference like just touching the material. It feels like acetate. Acetate will work just as fine for this, but depending on your thickness of the acetate, it can be easy or it can be hard to cut it. Really depends, so you need to play around with it. Okay, so here I've cut my big sheets into some 6 by 6 panels, so I cut the sheet in half and then in half again. And I have a bunch of milky mylar sheets and then some clear mylar sheets as well. So the first thing I want to show you is how to cut your corner guides. And I guess the question you might have here, why the heck do we even need them? Well, this is to help you with a stencil placement or a panel placement. When you are placing your cardstock, like let's say right here, and then I put a stencil on it, and you need to line up another stencil on top of it. Instead of like lining it up each time and spending time on it, you can just shove your stencil in the corner right here and it will all line up perfectly. Another way to use it would be to put it in your MISTI to help you with stamping. So I put this guide into the corner because I want to arrange stamps that are hanging off of the edge. So I need to keep my cardstock kind of in the middle so that I have room to put the stamps off of the edge. If I want to mass produce my cards, it will be a little bit tricky to get the positioning right every time unless I have that guide in place. So I just put my cardstock into the very, very corner of it, and that will allow me to remove the panel, put in another one, and then stamp it in the exact same position. Now, there are corner guides that one of the brands sells. I think it's Alt New. And they're like placement guides for a stamp wheel for their stamp positioning platform, but they cost like 12 or 15 bucks or something like this. A pack of, I don't know, 10 or 15 mylar sheets cost me just under 10 bucks. And I'll have all of them linked in the description box for you. It costs me less than 10 bucks, and I have so many sheets that I can cut my own stencils from. So to me, this is a much better deal. And making these corner guides is honestly 1, 2, 3, easy peasy. All right, so I have my trimmer here, and I'm gonna put my 6x6 panel and then shove it in about an inch in. So I am currently at the 5-inch mark. So it's like I wanted to cut off an inch off of the edge, but I'm not gonna do that entirely. So I'm gonna lower the handle, the blade of my trimmer, but then I'm not going to push it all the way down. So what I have is this half cut, not fully cut panel. Now I'm going to flip it around so that I have this edge that I'm gonna be cutting. And then the same thing, I'm gonna shove it in about an inch, like I wanna cut off that inch. And then I'm going to make a cut to about the place where I have my other cut. And again, I'm not gonna cut it through the very end. So here, you can use scissors to make the little snap and the piece falls out. And then this one, don't toss this because you can use this piece to cut out individual shapes. For these guys, you can make them as wide or as narrow as you want. I feel like 1 inch size is a pretty good size, so that's what I went with because it allows me more room around the edges in my MISTI, but it also not so big that I can't do anything with it. Another thing you can do with your stencil material is cut out masking strips. So this is just, I believe it's a 6-inch strip that I cut from a mylar sheet, and you can use this to mask the openings on your stencil and kind of blend around them. Easy peasy. Again, you can make it as long and as wide as you would like. Let's make an attempt at making a stencil. And this is that 5x5 piece that I had left over from the corner guide. So I'm gonna take an individual shape, which in my case is a snowflake, and I'm gonna arrange it in the middle the best I can. It doesn't need to be perfect, but do your best to line it up. And then I'm gonna tape it, and I'm gonna tape it real good. Tape like your life depends on it, because you don't want this thing shifting. Next, we'll bring out our die cutting machine. I'm gonna put my stencil over here on the plate. And then one thing I will warn you about, this might warp your plates. My plate was already on its last leg, so it's fine. But you see how it's concave? So that's fine. I'm gonna replace this plate anyway. So just be mindful that if you apply a lot of pressure, which you do need to do in order to be able to cut through it, it might damage your plates. So try at your own risk, or just try it with the old plates that you're about to replace anyway. So I'm gonna first try to cut it without any additional shims and see where it gets us. And I'm gonna roll it through a couple of times just to make sure that all of my cuts are being done. This is the back side of my stencil, and instead of untaping it and then checking if it cut, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my pokey tool and see if I can get all of the details out. I will kind of check if the cuts were made. And I think, okay, so my center didn't cut. Some of the edges did, but not the center. That's okay, my die is taped, so it's not moving anywhere. So I'm gonna put it in and add a cardstock shim. And I'm gonna run it through the machine again. This is to increase the pressure. And as you can see, it's going through with a little bit more effort. One important thing, guys, if you feel like it's too much pressure and your die cutting machine doesn't want to take the plate, the sandwich, do not force it, because there's a big chance that you might actually break your die cutting machine. So do not force anything if it's not going through. It's too much pressure and you need to remove a couple of shims. So I'm able to lift out some of the things, but not the center still. The center doesn't want to cooperate. So let's see if I can fit another shim here. This might not work. Okay, now I'm having a bit of a hard time running it through. So I probably wouldn't apply more pressure than this, because this is already kind of hard to move. Can I pop the shape out? Okay, so it only is stuck in two places, like on this corner here and on this corner here. That's fine. I'm gonna call it a success because I can use tiny scissors to snap the stencil, the piece free. I'm gonna go in here with my tiny scissors and just finish the cuts that the die was not able to get through. And I'm gonna be very careful so that I don't damage my stencil and accidentally cut where I don't want there to be a cut. After some effort, we have ourselves a nice snowflake. Now, here's the thing. Depending on how thick your material is, this is 7 mil, so it's pretty thick and sturdy. This might not cut through for the very intricate pieces, like for example this one, because this one has a lot of thin lines. It might not get through all the way through the stencil material. For stencils that have more intricate lines, I would use the thinner, clear type of material. One thing to note, that I was not able to cut these snowflakes out of the same material because this one is more intricate in shape than this. This one is larger, so it's easier to cut. The larger your die is, the easier the cuts will be. And especially when their lines are very close together, you will have, I can guarantee it, you will have issues cutting through the thick material. So kind of play with the thickness of your mylar. I would say start with a 4, but don't go anything higher than 7. So 4, 5, 6 should work okay. But I'm gonna test to see if I can cut these snowflakes out of the clear, thinner mylar. So hang on. All right, so I've taped my snowflakes, one at one edge, the other one at the other edge, because I want to use one stencil and have both of them. So I'm kind of saving room. So let me run it through the die cutting machine and I'll be back. Hi again, Editing Cat here. Let me just say that this was a fail and save you the time and the pain of watching this part. I ran the material through the machine about 20 times with multiple shims and still wasn't able to cut through all of it. I wanted this to work, but alas, it was a fail. But hey, you never know until you actually try. Now let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, let's take a look at what we got. So this is the first stencil that I cut with that snowflake. This one I cut with just your basic nested die, and actually keep this little cutout piece because it might come in handy. This one I cut with a background die that doesn't cut the edges. So you can see how I have the pattern cut out, but not the edge. This is a 6x6 piece. Now this one I have cut with this die, just 3 rectangles. This one I cut using the cover plate die that does cut an edge. And this is a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So basically what's gonna happen is you will have a bit of an a bit of a hard time trying to use it on a full panel of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. But I'm gonna test something out and see if this works and if I can get a full blended panel for it. Otherwise, the easiest way to get a stencil pattern out of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 stencil like that is to just cut down your cardstock panel so that you have enough room around the edges so you can stick them to your grip mat, and this way the stencil stays in place. I'll show you that as well. Now this one is cut from cardstock. This is the one I showed you in the beginning, and I managed to cut the same stencil from the thinner mylar material. We will test it and see if it holds up. And then last but not least, I have the butterfly that I have cut out with this die. And as you can see, it cuts the pattern but not the edge. So dies like these are really perfect for it. Now the fun part, let's test this out. So for the snowflakes, I have a trio of inks, so the light, medium, dark. We're gonna see what I can get out of the stencil. And guys, I'm testing this out real time, so there's a chance that things might not work out, but I guess you'll have to stick around to find out. So I'm putting my snowflake just hanging off of the edge, and then I'm gonna mask these areas so that I don't accidentally get ink on it, because I am very much prone to doing that. And as you can see here, I have a thicker corner guide, and you can use them as a masking tape. And then here is just another longer, wider strip that I got from a sheet to help me mask things. One thing I want to tell you here is that this stencil has a large open area in the center, and because of that, you might get pieces that are kind of, I don't want to say flimsy because they're not, I guess floppy, and they're not entirely attached to something else. So it's kind of easy to get your brush under the stencil and then your pattern is not gonna look good. So in order to avoid that, what I would recommend is having a tighter packed brush like this and not something fluffy like this, because I tried one of the stencils before with this brush and it actually managed to get under the stencil. So just be mindful. Also, if you're super concerned about getting under your stencil, when you blend over this, what you can do is you can take your pokey tool and kind of hold down the stencil and then get your brush and kind of blend over the pokey tool itself while you're holding it in place. And then just make sure you wipe up your tool so that there's nothing, no ink left on it. All right, so let me wipe up the ink. And again, when you're doing any sort of manipulation with your stencil, be careful so that the edges don't catch on your cloth so that you don't damage your stencil. I shifted my stencil a little bit. Just turn it around, and then I'm gonna mask my cardstock again. And then I'm gonna get my slightly darker color and blend over top. And again, this is a design decision that might not work out, but we will see. I mean, it looks kind of cool. Let me try doing another with a darker color. So this time I'm putting my stencil in a corner opposite. I'm not taking any chances, I'm masking everything. Now, let me do my medium color first. Okay. And then I'm gonna shift my stencil again. And then I'm gonna go in with my darker color. We got ourselves a panel, and I don't know if you notice, in here I didn't blend the middle entirely, so it kind of has that glowy look, and I kind of like that. I'm gonna keep this panel as is. I'm actually quite happy with how it turned out. The ink will dry back, so it's gonna lighten up in color a little bit, and we will see at the end what it looks like all dried down. Let's move on to the next one. Let's do a butterfly. And I'm also going for a pink and yellow, and when I mix those two, that should give me orange. So here, I'm gonna arrange it kind of in the middle. Maybe actually in a little bit more, because I'm gonna trim my panel if it turns out. Okay, so this one is kind of in the middle, and let's start with the lighter one. Let's start with the yellow. This is really pretty. I really like this. Okay, so then I'm gonna arrange my other butterfly here. I'm really liking how this is turning out. Okay, let's peel and reveal what we got. You guys, this is really pretty. I really like it. So far, I'm quite happy with how things are working out for me. This is gonna be a little bit tricky because my panel is 4 1/4 and my stencil is 4 1/4. I'm thinking what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tape it down in the areas where I don't have any openings. And we will see if this works. So I taped it up. It doesn't look very pretty, but who cares as long as it holds. And I'm gonna stick it to my mat and we will see what happens. And I wanna do these snowflakes in pink and purple. So it's the same pink as before and I'm bringing in purple hydrangea. So let's start with pink. I want to try this brush because it's more tightly packed than the fluffier brush I showed you earlier. So I'm hoping this will make it go a little faster. Okay, so one thing that I'm noticing is that I have a little hairs from die cutting. And this might mess with my pattern. So I'm not gonna wipe off any ink because it's cardstock, it's gonna absorb ink. One thing I will note here is that it took way more elbow grease to apply it through paper stencil because I feel like the cardstock, the top layer of cardstock is absorbing the ink faster than I can get it down to the surface. So this required quite a bit of effort. This is very, very pretty. I really like it. So cardstock works just fine. It might be a little bit harder to apply the ink, but if you don't want to purchase mylar, this works perfectly fine. I also have the same stencil cut out from the mylar, so I want to test that as well and see how it compares. Okay, so far so good, and I will say that it is easier to put the ink through. It requires way less pressure on my part to get the ink through this. I'm guessing because mylar is non-absorbent, like the cardstock is, so the ink stays on the surface and then I'm dragging it around with my brush and that makes it easier. And without removing the stencil, you can also see the pattern straight away, so I think this is a win despite the stencil being so delicate. And I'm also going to be very careful as wiping off excess ink. And then to clean it, I will spray it with alcohol and wipe it very, very gently from both sides. I use alcohol because I don't have to wait for the stencil to dry afterwards. Alcohol evaporates much faster. Aside from a more defined edge on this one, which we did with the stencil, compared to this one, like the edges are a little sharper, I can't really tell a difference here. They both look great to me. Okay, next, let's look at our heart stencil. So we already taped the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 stencil to the panel, and that's one of the ways that you can get a full panel out of it. The easier way, like I mentioned before, would be to cut down your cardstock, which is what I'm gonna do, so that the stencil can fit on top and around it. Okay, and this way I can stick my stencil on top, and my grip mat is gonna hold it in place for me because I now have that border. This is very cute. Alright peeps, let's take a look at our completed backgrounds. Most of them are a win, I would say, but some of them are fails, for the lack of better words, but you live, you learn. Alright, so that's the first one that we did with the large snowflake stencil. Now that the ink has dried down, there's not a whole lot of color variation over here, so I'm thinking I might go back and stencil over one of the snowflakes with the blue color, just to give it more contrast. Next are the snowflakes that we did using the paper stencil and the thin mylar stencil. Both are very pretty. Then we got our gorgeous butterflies. I have to say, this is probably one of my favorites. This came out stunning. 10 out of 10, no notes. Next, we got our cute little hearts, and this is a smaller panel. This is the confetti swirls background die that I made a stencil out of. I think it's pretty cute. And then this is the basic shape opening that we got with one of the stencils. It's not bad. And here are the ones that didn't turn out all that well. This was the one where we covered the middle with the stencil material and blended around it. And I'm not really feeling it, to be honest, so I don't know. This is probably going into my pile of scraps. And then this one, the blending is fine. What bothers me though is the fact that the ink seeped through the stitchings. So that's a bit annoying. And the fact that I got under the stencil because I wasn't very careful. Now, I plan on using these backgrounds, or at least as many as I can, to make some cards in the next video, so make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss it. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one.